I call to order and welcome you to the Middletown, Ohio regular City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024.
We have to come out of executive session.
Oh, forgive me. Thank you, Mr. West. First, do I hear a motion to return to open session?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to return to open session. We will proceed to vote. Ms. Gank, please call the roll.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mayor Slamka,
Yes.
Mrs. Carter, Mr. West.
Yes.
The yeses have it, and the motion passes. Council will now return to open session. This concludes our special meeting of the City Council for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024 at 5:35 p.m. This meeting is adjourned until Tuesday, October 1st, 2024 at now in these chambers for our next regular City Council meeting. Thank you. I now call to order and welcome you to the Middletown, Ohio regular City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. Please join me for a moment of meditation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. You will hear 3 taps of the gavel when it is time to stand. Please join me for a moment of meditation now.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk of Council, Mrs. Amy Skank, please call the attendance roll.
Mayor Slamka,
Here.
Mrs. Carter,
Here.
Mr. West,
Here.
Mr. Horn.
Here.
Thank you. The next order of business is citizen comments. We have 1 card this evening. A professional presentation is expected. This is not the time for debate, questions and answer, or any back and forth conversation. This is a time for you, our residents, to be able to present to council on record, uninterrupted, and have the floor. I will prompt each speaker for the next steps when they reach the podium. I would like to call Benjamin McCall to the podium. Please speak directly into the microphone. First, please state your full name and Middletown residence or work address for the record.
Yes, Benjamin McCall, 6758 Gray Birch Knoll, Liberty Township, Ohio. I'm here tonight.
You'll have 4 minutes. I just wanted to tell you that. Go ahead.
I will not take that long. I just wanted to introduce myself. Many of you I've met very shortly or briefly at some point over the last year. If you recognize my name, I'm running for state representative, and the only reason I'm here is to introduce myself, put a face to my, put a face to a name for you to see me, to interact, to reach out, but also to let all of you know on Saturday this weekend at 11:45 at Triple Moon, I'll be having a candidate meet and greet. So if you want to find out more or have very detailed questions, feel free to come out. So I know the election is coming up. I'm not here to pontificate. I just wanted to introduce myself. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Call. That concludes our public participation. The next item on the agenda is council comments. We will begin to my left with Councilmember Carter, and then to my right with Councilmember West, followed by Councilmember Horn. And I will speak last. Mrs. Carter?
Good evening. And it's a great day today. We were interviewing for another council member, and it made me realize how much I love this city. And I love our acting city manager and Ashley and our attorney. So I'm just in love with Middletown today. And I have nothing else to say.
Thank you. Mr. West?
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, we love you. But no, I'd like to just echo what Jennifer said. I mean, it's nice to hear and see so much talent here in our city. A tough decision, but it's really nice to sit down and have conversations about, you know, where people want to see the city go and where we're at so far. Other than that, quick park update. Sherman Park, the basketball court is pretty much done now. Drove by it earlier. It looks great. The weather forecast is looking a lot better, so I think the kids can come back out this weekend and use it quite a bit. But thank you, Mayor. Oh, and I'd like to thank Zach Farrell for all his effort the last couple of years here on council, and congratulate him on his new wife, and wish him the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. Mr. Horn.
Good evening. It is refreshing to see many people apply for position that's available. It's refreshing to also hear some of the comments from these folks about our city. And one of my titles is journeyman, and I get to journey a lot. And it is good to see on the south side, we're seeing the community center construction come up. We're seeing over on the east side, we're seeing construction being almost completed with the fire station, and then also with Renaissance Point. It just shows we are moving forward in what we're trying to accomplish here, which is for the next generation, for that 10-year-old, for that 20-year-old, for that 30-year-old. Some of the folks we've even had conversations with, they really do love this city. They do find some of the parts of the city that they live in that they appreciate it. They want to have their families here, and that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do. Next thing I want to talk about is something that's very important, and I'll say it till up to the date. You need to register to vote. This is your right as a citizen of this country. If you're not registered, get registered. The election is coming up soon, and then you will vote for the policies that you want, the issues that you want. You have the vote, and that is your right. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Just kind of tail off of that, Butler County Elections, Board of Elections is where you could go online and look for more information on that. I also would like to thank Council Member Farrell for his time on council. I really thought he was wonderful to work with, and I'm happy for him and his family. I have a few comments this evening. First of all, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is an international program that provides one free book every month to every child that is signed up from birth to 5 years of age. The branch in Ohio raises money for the program in all of Ohio. This Saturday, there is a luncheon to raise money for the Imagination Library, and while that event is sold out at just shy of 180 tickets, you're still able to donate to this cause. As Dolly Parton herself says, she wants to inspire children to love to read, because if you can read, you can learn anything. For more information on how to give, please contact the Middletown Community Foundation at mcfoundation.org. Also this Saturday, October 5th, is Downtown Middletown Inc.'s, or DMI's, inaugural Bros Bourbon and Beer event from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. in downtown Middletown. A match for the Women's Wine and Chocolate Walk every spring, this event is open for all. For tickets and more information, please visit www.downtownmiddletown.org. Midpoint Library in Middletown is hosting Midpoint Artisans on Thursday, October 10th. Learn bookbinding using the accordion method. The seminar begins at 6 p.m. and is located in the boardroom of the library. They welcome those 18 and up of all skill levels. Registration is required. For more information, please visit www.midpointlibrary.org. The City of Middletown's Movies in the Park will be showing Wonka, starring Timothée Chalamet, next Friday, October 11th in Sunset Park, located at 2698 Milton Road. Activities begin at 7 p.m. and the movie starts at dark. Free snacks during the movie will be provided by Kingswell, and there will be a food truck for cost. For more information, please email Jerry Lewis at jeril@cityofmiddletown.org. Sunday, October 13th, is Middletown's last farmers market of the season. Located at the bus depot downtown, the market opens at 10 a.m. and ends at 2 p.m. For more information, please email Jerry Lewis at jerryl@cityofmiddletown.org. Sunday, October 13th, is also Middletown's Hocus Pocus Halloween Family Fun Festival, hosted by DMI. From 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. in downtown Middletown at Central Avenue and Main Street, there will be fun for the whole family. Food trucks, music, dancing, games, spookiness, the Sanderson sisters, vendors galore, and much more. Do not miss this wonderful autumnal event in Middletown. For more information, please visit www.downtownmiddletown.org. Middletown's second annual Hispanic Heritage Festival was canceled this past Saturday due to weather. The new date will be Saturday, May 3rd, 2025, to be celebrated in conjunction with Cinco de Mayo. For more information, please email loom.middletown2023@gmail.com. Loom is spelled L-U-M. As a reminder, the City of Middletown accepts applications for our boards and commissions throughout the year, so if there is something that you have an interest in and you wish to give back to your city in this way, please do submit your application. To see more, please visit the city's website at www.cityofmiddletown.org. Lastly, and as always, there are many ways to get involved with your community and give back. Join a board or committee, run for office, apply for a job with the city, volunteer at the hospital, pick up trash in your neighborhood or park, plant a garden in your yard, smile at a neighbor, find joy and satisfaction for a job well done in whatever work you do, or just have a positive and giving attitude. Find something that you can do regularly and give back. We are all connected and we are all in this together. The care of our city is an adventure in which we all get to share. That is all for me tonight, and this concludes our council comments. The next item on the agenda is the city manager's report. Acting City Manager Nathan Cahall, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of council. Just two items. One's a lot bigger than the first one here, but wanted to have a discussion with you here in an open meeting as to what your thoughts are on further exploring the city's divestiture of its transit authority to BCRTA, and if you're amenable to staff entering into any negotiations to bring back to you, hopefully before the end of the year, an agreement for you to weigh in on and act upon. And I just wanted to open up the floor for discussion on that.
Certainly. Are there any questions from council? Questions or comments?
Question. Why are we transferring? Why would we transfer? What's the benefit?
So there's a couple rationales behind that. First of all, in essence, we have already, at least on day-to-day operations, delegated the operation of the city's transit authority to BCRTA. They operate the transit system here in the city on our behalf. We pay them to do so. And we have over time, we are down to only one part-time transit employee that's still actually on our payroll. So day to day, the system for all practical purposes is already run by BCRTA. The other issue we run into is that we still, on paper and legally, own and operate the transit authority. So that requires us to be responsible for and to report on its operations, but also prepare for and be in the middle of the conduction of audits, compliance reporting, as we are shifting funds both from FTA at the federal level and ODOT through our books onto BCRTA. And honestly, it creates an extra layer of administrative burden for our staff. It does create some issues from time to time, just as we're trying to be as compliant as possible. And then the third reason actually is that aside from the operations, the one component of the operations here in town that we do directly perform, and that is the maintenance of all the fleet, all the bus fleet, which ties up a substantive amount of time and resources at the garage that doesn't allow us to get to other municipal departments' vehicle and equipment repair needs.
So will we be able to add more lines, like out to the Y? That's one of the things that I'm looking at. Once the aquatic center is developed, will we have transportation?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the details I think to negotiate is that the city, to have a voice and a seat at the table for any modifications to existing lines or the addition of new services, and our ability to facilitate that in cooperation with BCRTA. But I would imagine that would be something that, if given permission, we would want to include in an agreement with BCRTA.
And the hours?
Yes.
Possibly later hours?
Yeah.
And did you say we only have one driver now?
We're down to one part-time bus driver. Over the millennia, We used to operate this transit system in-house with our own employees. We had our own fleet of bus drivers.
Right.
And everyone else. The city then migrated to a business model to where BCRTA took custodial, supervisory power day-to-day over our employees that were still left, and then also supplemented the system as it operates here in Middletown with their workforce. And then we through a contract with them, compensated them for that service. And over time, our city bus driver staff has waned through retirement or resignation, and now we're just down to one part-time.
Thank you.
What inherent risks do you see if we go through with this?
I think the one risk that I think honestly the city should guard against is just to make sure that there's adequate cost containment any given year. That there's a agreed upon, formula for if there's any necessary local match of any grant dollars or anything that do benefit the city's portion of the perhaps eventual larger RTA system, that there's some fairness and equity there. Much like fully outsourcing any other service, you'd want to make sure that there are guards in place. And as well as there's some advice and consent over certain large, big ticket, service and operations items. We have been fortunate for the last several years, due unfortunately to the pandemic, that between the federal government and the state government, not only have they fully funded capital expenditures through capital grants for new buses and other equipment, they have also fully subsidized operations.
Right.
The previous model, depended upon the year and whatever the percentage split was, whether it was 90-10, 80-20 or whatnot, but to get those federal operating dollars, the city or BCRTA for its own purposes elsewhere in the county, if they wanted that $1 million, let's just make up a number, they wanted that $1 million of operating dollars, they had to bring, $200,000 to the table. We have been very fortunate as a small transit system, kind of a small solo standalone transit system, that there's been that subsidy. There is the risk in the future that Congress could change its mind, and that program or that level of subsidization of operating costs could go away. BCRTA is a much larger entity, and to the extent they may be able to absorb that within their budget versus the city having to draw on its general fund, there's a little bit of a juxtaposition there.
So this is going to help our public works for the fact that now we're not going to have to maintain these buses at all. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's to be negotiated, but yeah, I mean, that's the hope.
Okay, and then I think when we had them here last time, I asked the question of if we'd have to change lines, like alter the red line to go from Atrium over to the Y. They said they had no problem. So it's their system completely. So when the buses have, over time, the depreciation of the buses and need to be replaced, is that still all theirs, or?
Yeah, I mean, what's been contemplated at a staff level with BCRTA is that there would also be a handover of all the system's assets. So whatever buses or other equipment may be in the name of the city of Middletown, as part of this transfer would be then the property of BCRTA.
Okay.
Have any other questions or comments? So my only thing was looking forward, and it sounds like this is all in negotiation, but like how it would impact the city financially 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah. I think that's, the great unknown is just if and when and to what degree the operating subsidy may be reduced in the future. And it's not that Middletown is alone in that boat and subject to that. BCRTA, other transit systems across the state and across the country will have to adjust to that. But to the extent that Middletown only level of subsidization or matching dollars, I should say, for that subsidy every year, if it does get reduced, may be lessened if we're part of a larger transit system.
Okay, thank you. All right. I think that's it for us, or is there any, do we have any,
No,
no motion, but
I didn't hear consensus of
Yeah.
no.
just,
Yeah, I
it
mean,
sounds like,
I'd definitely be interested to see, you kind of know where we're coming from.
Yes.
And what to ask for, so,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
we'll sit down with BCRTA leadership here next week or so and see if we can get something to you, maybe as early as the 15th for an initial review, not to ask for any action, but, see what we can get done.
does everybody agree with that? Just take a look
Yeah.
at it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
All right, well, this is probably what most people are here for. I know at least the people behind me are. So tonight, on behalf of our senior leadership staff and all of our employees, I'm proud to present the 2025 budget proposal for your consideration as it pertains just to the general fund this evening. As we communicated in the Friday letter, the plan of action is a little different than in years past, but the plan of action this year is to present the general fund, which is our major operating fund for all general governmental services, including public safety. Gather input and insight and direction from you tonight. Come back on the 15th and present the non-general fund, so our enterprise funds, our water and sewer fund, our health insurance fund, garage fund, those kinds of special revenue or enterprise funds. Do that same information and solicitation of comment process again, and then, as we do every year, then start the first reading of that potentially static or slightly revised budget proposal for your consideration at the first meeting in November, so that you are in a place, hopefully, to take action on the 2025 operating and capital budget at the second meeting in November, as is standard and customary. I want to thank all of our departments and quite the list of our dedicated staff for putting so much work into the preparation of the budget. Great care is taken by all of our departments and divisions, not only to be purposeful in the budget requests that they make in terms of what will be the policy and program and operational outcomes by the dollars sought, but also a shared goal and a shared kind of prime directive that what we do, not only in the general fund, but across all funds, we are doing it in a sustainable fashion so that we aren't setting ourselves up for fiscal concerns a year or 2 or 5 years from now, as best as we can look into the crystal ball and see the future, of course. So what tonight is being presented to the general fund represents a budget proposal that, at least I believe, and our staff believes, uses the guiding principles that council communicated earlier this year in terms of investment priorities, a reserve fund balance target, and a host of other items that we believe this budget proposal starts us down that path towards meeting those guidelines. So to start, and as we've talked about, this budget, I'm going to just say the D word, it's a deficit budget. But what's important is it's a planned deficit budget. This city, for probably the last 2 to 2.5 fiscal cycles, has purposefully supplanted and grown the general fund's balance, knowing that once we got to a critical mass, there was an opportunity for the city to make significant and strategic investments in people, projects, and programs. So the significant changes that you will see compared to last year is we have baked into the cake a 5% COLA for all of our non-union employees, and have placeholders for a couple of the bargaining units that we have either have not finished negotiations with for a new contract, and or have a wage reopener annually for consideration. All other cost of living adjustments, step increases, and anything that you may see in the personnel line items, Those are subject to the existing collective bargaining agreements. We are also looking at an increase in the employer share of health insurance premiums with an offsetting employee share increase as well of 3.5%, which is fairly modest. I'm happy to report that our health care, we are self-insured and self-funded. And so I'm happy to report that we have, for the last couple of years, we've run better than we would normally project. This increase, although it does account for an expected rate increase that we may see at the beginning of next year. However, we do have some fund reserves to rely on, as we did this year, in that healthcare fund. This budget reflects the first time in 7 years that we have asked our employees for a premium increase, which I will tell you in this business is unheard of. And it's a testament to how well our staff and our partnering TPA manage our health insurance program. You will also see budgeted income tax revenue for next year is projected to increase by 4.7%. Now, that does sound a little aggressive, but keep in mind the 2024 budgeted income tax level was purposefully modest, just to make sure that certain revenue trends that we had witnessed over a 2-year cycle were actually real. So we wanted proof of life. And so really it's a 4.7 against budget, but it's really about a 2% against what we believe will be actual this year. The guiding budget factors that I briefly hit upon were to invest in additional staffing to provide more robust services, and we'll go over that this evening with our various general fund departments. Draw down the general fund reserves to a level supported by council. What staff heard was, and what we also advised that makes Moody's Investor Services happy and everyone else feeling good about our financial standing, is to, at any given year, do not attempt to go below 35%, if at all avoidable, of our general fund expenses. Use our general fund. This is one of our things, and what you'll see is a primary driver for some of the general fund expense increases is to replenish certain special revenue funds that we have previously drawn down. So, for instance, for our police operations, we have three special revenue funds where certain criminal forfeiture and seizure proceeds are deposited that can only be used for law enforcement purposes. The last couple budgets, we had seen that those special revenue funds had very large balances in them that weren't really being spent. And so previous councils appropriated those dollars to be spent for law enforcement purposes, which then allowed our general fund to go back up proportionately. And now we're just kind of readjusting the water in the ballast tanks of the ship, so to speak. And I think I know the other driver here, one of the guiding principles, is to continue to make investments in parks and other capital areas that are a priority of city council and of staff. So you're going to see this general fund budget represents an increase of 35% in expenditures compared to this current fiscal year for the general fund. And this is due to this body's direction to strategically spend down the fund reserve that has accumulated over the past few years. Keep in mind that the expenditures and the revenues that you're seeing at the end of the day are slightly skewed because there's an in and an out, or a debit and a credit, as it relates to the bond anticipation note revenue and then the refunding and expense related to the purchase of the town mall. As you know, we have 3 bands out there. Only one of them is general fund specific, and that was for the acquisition of the mall. That was a $7 million note. It's our intention to roll that note and reissue it in about June of next year, I believe is the timing of that. So that skews things a little bit. So the tail of the tape, end of the day, we are projecting a general fund reserve balance at the end of this year of a little more than $20 million. If approved by council, this general fund budget would draw that down at the end of 25 to an estimated $16 million, which is right around 38 to 39% of annual expenses. One of the questions you may be asking is, why not go a little bit further, Nathan and staff? Let's keep in mind that we want to make sure that some of these expenses, especially related to staffing, are sustainable. The worst thing that we can do as an employer is to add new positions and then eliminate them in the near future. It's not the right thing to do. So we want to make sure that our revenue projections going into 27 are also keeping in line. And as we are kind of bringing down this jetliner from 20,000 feet to approach, we level out by the end of budget year 26, which our forecasting models all indicate that we should be able to achieve that with ease. So for the last, if you want to look back, the last almost, 7 or 8 years of where our budgeted revenues versus actual revenues. So as you can see, we budget our revenues conservatively. Most notably, we attempt to be very conservative in our income tax revenue projections. So the split in our revenue for income tax is pretty much an 80-10-10 almost split. 80% is, in any given year, is off employee withholding. So those are the payroll deductions that are withheld from everyone's paychecks that works here in town. Another 10% are our individual filers. So those are folks that are sole proprietors, independent contractors, or folks that have to report passive income that they may receive through an LLC, an S Corp, or some other corporation or incorporated entity that they are a shareholder or owner of. And then the third component of that other 10% or so, is our corporate net profit. Corporate net profit tax revenues fluctuate. They fluctuate greatly. And so that is one of the main parts as we are with our finance department are estimating and projecting revenues year to year to year. Even though we may have a good year in 23 or 24 with corporate net profits, we're not banking on that, and that really accounts for a good chunk of why you see this spread. This chart, if anything, should assure you that you have good problems to have. So when we look on the expenditure side, you will see that this actually, you're kind of wondering, well, what has happened over the last 4 years with expenditures? We have a budgeted, but we keep on going over. What this is reflected is that blue line is what the original budget was. What you will find is that incrementally throughout the fiscal cycles, City Council has made certain supplemental appropriations out of the general fund. And what I'll say is to fund some opportunities from time to time based on revenues outpacing projections and the comfort level felt to make those expenditures. But yet again, the fund balance, as you've seen, has still grown year over year. So when we look at our general fund budget, we drop it down into these categories of the city council, city manager's office and divisions, IT, finance, police, fire, and other general fund expenses. The general fund budget is approximately, as proposed, $54.2 million compared to $40 million as passed, although supplemented throughout this year, of $40 million. So you're looking at about a $35.5 or $14 million increase in general fund expenditures planned for next year. Some of those are costs that are ongoing costs, most notably related to personnel. Others are one-time investments or one-time transfers or one-time rebalancing of certain funds that we'll get into here momentarily that would not necessarily be reflected in the 26 budget. So as we go through this listing, so for City Council, you are seeing an increase. This is based on, this is not necessarily the city manager or staff's proposal as much as one that has been asked to be entertained by all of council because this position, the request is to add a deputy clerk position to the budget. Obviously, that would fall under a personnel category that isn't mine. It would be a subordinate of other council employees. So I leave that to you folks to weigh in on one way or another. But adding the deputy clerk position to the city clerk's office it accounts for that change, with the exception of a few other increases for some things we've been running over on, like, I don't know, legal ad notices and certain other contracted services or supplies. So that accounts for that increase. Within the city manager's umbrella, you'll see that that includes human resources, law, communications, the event center, which is a new addition, the community center, and our emerging recreation division, spearheaded by Ms. Lewis. You're looking at about a $250,000 increase, or an 8.75% increase. This actually, this proposal includes a human resources clerk position, which has gone unfilled and budgeted for about 2 years now, and a new assistant in the law department to assist our paralegal and legal staff, as we found we continue are getting a little bit behind here and there. Our event center, you'll notice that we just passed a mid-year budget, so this new full-year budget should account, we hope, for any expenditures throughout the year as we get that operation up and running, with actually our Dolly Parton group being a good dress rehearsal event there at the community center, as I understand. And then just moving the community projects coordinator position out from the city manager's office just to a recreation division line item, just so that we can kind of better track those expenses. You'll see the communications is actually, we're reducing some funding there compared to last year. But everything else is really in accounting for just kind of actual costs or those staff increases. Information IT, this is just some changes around the edges for some software costs, some other contractual costs that aren't typically handled by other departments' budgets or our computer replacement fund. But, you know, certain things just go up in cost, subscription-wise or otherwise, each and every year. In finance, so finance has finance administration, treasury, and purchasing. The biggest proposed increase is to add a staff accountant position to the finance division of the finance administration, just because of the ongoing increase in reporting and auditing requirements year to year, along with the need to, more in a timely fashion, provide our departments with some financial analyses, whether that's related to, you know, projecting, you know, things that we may currently outsource, like looking at utility rate modeling and increases, or our financial forecasting, or providing timely input on, okay, what are the impacts of a negotiated labor contract provision you may, you know, here or there. But the request is to add an additional staffer there that is as a staff accountant, and it can help with not only the day-to-day operation, but more importantly, some of the more time-consuming planning and modeling work that is just not getting done right now, just because of the bandwidth we have in the finance department. This one's a little bit messier, because you'll remember that we have kind of a Frankenstein monster, not in the pejorative sense, but we mashed together 3 or 4 or 5 offices mid-year this year related to development and planning, zoning, economic development, CDBG, whole 9 yards. And so this is our new Community and Economic Development Department full-year budget. As you'll recall, we added an additional planner. You authorized the additional planner position, and a code specialist, another program manager, grant project coordinator. We added a process server here again for your consideration, as we are running into issues getting people served for not only nuisance and code violations, but also income tax as well, and this would be a shared position. Have removed allocations for a couple other positions, and then repositioned a few things, but this is really just reflective of some organic growth, just because things go up in price contractually and the like, and also the addition of that other position. Our fire division, you recently adopted a new collective bargaining agreement with the local. This is reflective of that in terms of wages and in terms of staffing. You'll notice that the 2024 original budget assumed just a 3% step increase, whereas actual negotiations resulted in 10%. So that'll show kind of a larger skew between this year versus 24 budget. That's actually the original budget number. You're really probably cutting that increase by half, and it's probably closer to about a 5% increase for all fire operations compared to this year's actual costs versus what's proposed for next year. One of the bigger drivers of that, aside from wage increases, is some of the replacement costs with that new agreement that you authorized with, or maybe authorizing tonight with Stryker, replacing some of our EMS-related equipment, and also now gearing up for increases. And the other driver of this is we are increasing the vehicle and equipment depreciation expense that gets transferred out of this division's line item into the garage fund, because we have seen where ambulances and fire engines and ladder trucks have essentially doubled in price in 3 years. And so we have to plan for that. And the only way to do that is to continue to run that sinking fund process by transferring it over to the garage fund in a higher amount than even was ever contemplated 3 years ago. Police, this is another area where we are proposing the addition of staff, and in consultation with our police chief and his command staff and others, we are proposing, and these proposed positions all relate at the end of the day of getting more officers out in the field and on the streets. So where you may only see a proposal of only one additional officer, and that was in consultation with the police chief, opposed to, I know we were maybe on a goal for 2 a year or how many ever. There are other positions that are going to free up officer time. Most notably, the proposal to add 2 new jailers, which will reduce our need to hold over an officer to work in the jail from time to time and being pulled off of patrol. The addition of an additional dispatcher, which will bring our numbers up to 16, and reduce the need for overtime or shift fills that are being filled by officers or other personnel. And then you will see in the additions of, as has been adopted, the new command structure with 2 lieutenants and the 3 deputy chiefs, and the subsequent roster of sergeants as we staff up and promote up within the division here over the next, hopefully, next less than 6 months. We're making good progress. But what I can stress here is that these non-police positions, it may be counterintuitive, how does that help? But that is going to help us reduce shifts in which we are calling upon our officers to do something other than to be police officers out on the road or out on the street. And at the end of the day, it's only costing about 4.5% more, which we're going to gain hopefully in a larger street presence and operational presence and a reduction in overtime. There is a portion of public works and utilities that is embedded in the general fund. We have building maintenance. Quite frankly, you're going to see a large increase in building maintenance. There's 2 drivers for that. Number one, we've inherited 2 new facilities in the last 18 months, one of which we hope not to have for the long term, but the other one we will have in the long term, being the event center and senior center. And those require some upkeep, and we're at a point where we need to add an additional maintenance worker and also another building cleaner to do things right. We're not keeping up on this building, let alone some of these others. And, you know, we have to step up our game. I'm not satisfied where we are with building maintenance and upkeep, and we need to do better. This is going to allow us to do that. And frankly, we have underfunded building maintenance. I will say that it's probably, if Neil Wilson's here, he's probably chuckling, but budgetarily, it has traditionally been a little bit more of it's not a high priority, or it's easy just to kind of, maybe we won't need that fixed this year, or maybe the furnace won't go out, or maybe this won't break. Inevitably, we are having to find general fund dollars elsewhere for building maintenance year in and year out. And so what staff believes is that number is actually a true cost of our facilities maintenance and upkeep. There's a reduction in engineering. For whatever reason, we have been charging a certain amount of our engineers' time and payroll to the general fund, when really it's most notably should be charged to our enterprise funds, capital funds and the like. So this is a readjustment that reduces that expense. Parks maintenance, we are proposing to add 3 new maintenance workers for parks maintenance. I mean, we're putting in really nice equipment. We're redoing some of these parks, and by God, we're going to keep them looking nice and upkept and doing the right thing, because the worst thing that we can do for our community and on behalf of the taxpayers that are paying for this is to put out some really nice park improvements, and then they wither and die and go away because of neglect. So what's very important is that if we're stepping up on the capital end, we need to step up on the maintenance end. And we're thankfully in a financial position to do all of this, which has not always been the case in this community, but we are now in a place to do that, which is exciting because we're behind the 8 ball on some things and we need to catch up. There is a portion of the general fund that's debt service, and that looks like a really scary 5,000% increase. Wow, I think Lauren's back there just typing away looking at that number. Keep in mind, the main driver of this is the bond anticipation note for the mall, as it shows that we technically have to pay off about $7 million in debt compared to this current year's $158,000. But that's going to be money out, money back in as we roll that note. Our core debt service out of the general fund is the ladder truck that was purchased a few years ago, and then the extra $10 million on the fire stations. So about million, or only about $1 million of that is actually true debt that's permanent, long-term debt for the general fund. And of course, there is no new general fund debt issuance contemplated for 2025. There's nothing, on the foreseeable future or a need or a perceived have to on that one. On our non-departmental, this is where we categorize everything that's not maybe one department's expense or another. This is where we pay property taxes. This is where we pay, for phone lines and electricity for this building. This is where we pay the general liability insurance for the entire city, or some of our other claims and the like. And so for general expenses, for non-departmental, there's a proposed increase of around $1 million. And then a proposed about $300,000 increase in our transfers. And what are we doing here? The big driver for the general expense increase is around $425,000 for a new CAD and RMS system for dispatch and our police division. We are currently running a system on the RMS side and dispatch side that is limited or not supported anymore by the vendor. This is something that has been kind of kicked down the can, or the can's been kicked down the road for a few years just because of the price tag. No one's going to tell you that $400-some-thousand is cheap. It's a major expense. But this is something that for continuity of operations and ongoing quality level of service, we have to do eventually. And this is part of the general fund proposal to just go ahead and bite the bullet and do it and migrate over to a new system. Another driver of the cost is that to ensure that we continue to reduce and contain any growth in healthcare costs for the city as an employer, we are proposing to offer the first time to our employees who are on our high deductible health plan, or the HSA plan, to offer to pay half of their annual deductible as an inducement for migration to that plan away from the more expensive PPO plans that are offered under our buffet of offerings. This is something that is supported by the Healthcare Committee and is sustainable and is actually a very common practice both in public and private sector, that there be some employer match of deductible annually for these plans. There is also some additional funding for facility security upgrades, whether that be some installation of some camera systems or some other things that we need to do, not only in this building, but some of our other facilities as well. And then I'm also happy that this budget can absorb in the general fund an additional $500,000 to be transferred to the capital fund for additional park improvements that, as you'll see our next meeting under the capital fund, will allow probably about another $1.5 million of park investments to be made for 2025 if we can get it all out the door and done, which is a good problem to have. So just to recap, we're looking at right now sliding into home plate here at the end of December with about $20 million in the bank in the general fund. That's about 46% of our annual expenditures in reserve. This 2025 budget proposal in front of you for the general fund would reduce that down to 16 or just around 39%, which is above our target, our floor that was, I think, unofficially established and thrown out as a guidepost for staff. And it gives us a little bit of wiggle room to adjust and maneuver if certain revenue or expense projections are a little off, and keeps us in safe territory. But this 2025 general fund proposal in front of you tonight, it represents a significant use of general fund reserves to make key investments in people, projects, and programs. We have ran this budget, not only in the general fund, but all of our funds. We have run this several different ways through our financial forecasting system to see if this level of planned, and I have to stress planned, general fund deficit spending, if it ends in 2026, are we on a sustainable path? I, finance director, both concur that this puts us in a place to where by the end of 26, we have hopefully accomplished a lot more than we have in a 2-year period than in maybe previous times because of circumstance. And added, we are on a sustainable trajectory to where we're not going to have to go into contraction mode and drastically reduce expenditures, or I shouldn't say reduce expenditures, reduce ongoing expenditures as we deliver the goods and services and programs that our community counts on. And so with that, Your Honor, members of council, that is the general fund budget proposal for 2025. And we are happy to entertain any questions you might have or field any critiques or thoughts or things that you may want to see in a revised piece of legislation that'll come your way here in November.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cahal. That was an excellent presentation. I want to thank you and the rest of staff as well.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments right now on the budget? Mr. Horn?
So and I called in earlier and asked this question, but I just want to make sure that we're aware. When it comes to the building department, you did shift the assistant over. They're still there.
Yes.
The concern is, or not concern, just my statement is, for the next 5 years, we are going to be doing major construction in this city. And it's going to be permitted. It's going to be industrial, commercial, and new residential. That's where this department makes their money, not chasing flippers who don't want to pull permits or homeowners who think they can build things. That permitting is about 50% of what should be actually permitted. So I just want to be very clear that even though that budget went down, that it has the backing that we understand that we're going to be doing a lot of reviewing, a lot of permitting, a lot of inspecting over the next 5 years, not just the 2025.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, hear you loud and clear, Mr. Horn. I mean, our building department, you know, we try to run that as an internal enterprise operation. But we are very cognizant that one of the things that we can offer for economic development incentives that a lot of communities can't, some can, is that we can review everything in-house for the most part, or very quickly sub it out to a plans examiner and get a quick turnaround, and we inspect, and we're a one-stop shop for all your permitting, whether that's building, electric, plumbing, health department license, everything, which is a huge convenience compared to operating in other jurisdictions where you may have to go to the county for 2 or 3 things, and then this city, and then over here for this, you know, contractor. So very cognizant of making sure that we are in a place that we can meet the expectations, because not only is it plan review that's important, but inspection. If I call in for an inspection today, can you even maybe fit me in this afternoon? Or can you fit me in first thing the next morning when that concrete pour is coming? And I can attest that our staff does an outstanding job making sure that happens. And the current staffing model, we're very confident we'll still be able to meet that level of service.
And because I have experience with this, I cannot emphasize the importance of keeping a city staff, because you get to learn folks who can build consistently through the city, and you also know the folks who want to break the code, not bend the code. And if you subcontract that out, those folks are just coming in to do an inspection. Maybe they don't know that person's capabilities of doing it right or doing it incorrectly. And the main thing about construction is, no matter what trade it is, you're trying to protect people and property. And that is very important when it comes to that portion of it.
Yes.
My next question, and I'm trying not to go too far off this, when it comes to law enforcement, we're going to be opening up a new fire station over across the street from Renaissance Point. We will have a fire station on Dixie Highway, and I think you and I have had this conversation. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important that we put a remote police station at that it's our building, and we can actually renovate that. I guess the question I have is, within this budget, do we have wiggle room for, because we're going to add more officers, convert that to a police station? And the reason why I really like that location is you're near all the thoroughfares. You can service the east side. You can assist officers going in toward town near the Braille area. And most importantly, if we have an incident at the high school or middle school, those officers can be there very quickly to help serve our SROs. Mm-hmm. So how does that, me being kind of still new with these budgets, how does that work if we have to get money there for that?
So as I and the finance director, we always model these budgets since I've been here. You notice we didn't go all the way down to 35%. We left a little bit of meat on the bone, hovering around 39 for just those types of scenarios. Once we're done with the last 2 fire stations, hopefully by May, that's going to be we'll telegraph it now, that's going to be something in front of you folks as to direction as to how best to either reutilize, sell off, or somehow divest of those 4 legacy fire stations. We've already been in informal discussions with interested parties on a couple of the firehouses, this one not being one because we knew this is a possibility. So there will be some wiggle room later on. It may manifest itself as a supplemental appropriation if we have to do some major renovations or something, but most definitely that's on the horizon.
Okay. My last question is, where's the health department?
So the health department is a special revenue fund, so it'll be in front of you on the 15th.
Okay.
Yes.
I just had a couple things, and one, I see with public safety, adding 1 additional officer. I know there's some optimism there that we'll be able to free up some officer time, additional jailers, things like that. To me, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, we know in the real world, staffing all of these positions doesn't always work out. My personal preference would be, and I don't know how the rest of council feels, but if we give the police chief a little bit more wiggle room on that, so instead of one additional in the budget, we look at maybe a second, potentially a third.
Yeah, and this is something that we've vacillated on. Just give you a look behind the curtain here. This is a discussion that I and Chief Nelson had probably as of a week ago. We were looking at sustainability of costs going forward in certain departments and divisions. And we had modeled 2 new patrol officers, or two more officers in uniform patrol. And we were getting tight on a few other things. And, you know, I rely on our staff because they live and breathe their departments, their divisions day in and day out. They know a lot more than I do about them. And I was like, you know, Chief, if push comes to shove, what is more of a priority? You know, is it another officer? But that may mean we have to drop a dispatcher position maybe to add, or wait and see till June. And where we left it was this proposal with an idea of, let's see where revenues are come June and have that discussion with council, and see if our hypothesis is panning out. Are these other new supplemental positions, are they really doing what they're doing? You know, so I mean, we can look at that some more. I can talk to the police chief and his command staff and see, you know, if there's an alternative route, but really was given that choice to the police division as to, if push comes to shove and we think we can afford X dollars, how do you want to mix it up in terms of staffing? Obviously, the jail is probably first and foremost in my discussions with the chief, in terms of feeling that that has efficacy, that is going to help reduce or help increase our ability to have more people on the street. Dispatch is secondary to that. Dispatch, as much as anything, is either the choice between, if we're down in dispatch, we're either a choice between pulling one of our officers or personnel that are on station or out in the field to come in and dispatch, and we go slightly light out in the field, or we're having somebody come in off duty, OT, whether that's a fire or police, you know, employee, to come in and help supplement dispatch if we don't have other dispatchers working OT. So that's kind of the rub in the operational and the managerial decision that our police chief has to make, or whoever's the officer in charge on that shift or that day, of, do I go one less on the street, whether that's for the jail or dispatch? Do I go light, or do we call an OT? And that's what we're struggling with. You know, that's the rub.
Yeah, I mean, the other scenario in my mind is, well, a couple things. I mean, so you could have a nearby jurisdiction go through a bargaining agreement, hand out a double-digit raise, and we lose 5 in a couple months, and then we're in a pinch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, when we look at operational strength, yeah, you kind of have that sweet spot if we have the positions filled. But, and I kind of look at it this way, you can't have too many police officers on the street. I mean, that's sort of the number one concern from a lot of citizens, is public safety. You know, I think additionally, with some of the projects coming in, there are concerns about construction theft. To me, I would kind of err more on the side of caution when it comes to projecting how many we'd like to add. I don't know. It's something really to think about, because I mean, that's always the number one thing we hear and we experience, you know, living here, is that, you know, we might have a handful on the street at any given time, but would an additional one here or there, they would definitely be gainfully employed, I guess, is my take on that.
Oh yeah, And I don't want the false impression to think that, or be the false impression that, hey, it's just proposed in one and that's never. It's just, as staff is looking at this, police command staff as well, along with city management staff, as we're looking at this as a multi-year progression. And it may not be homogeneous, it's 2 or 3 every year. There may be ebbs and flows. We're dealing with a operational issue that is driving cost. It's driving cost and burnout, both in dispatch and in corrections. Because just like with officers, let's say last year at certain times, there's forced holdover in the jail right now. And that's becoming an ongoing issue that we're trying to address. And it's cheaper to address it with an additional corrections officer versus an additional officer or two that gets called in to help operate the jail during a shift or whatnot. So that's the balancing act. The thought really was to go whole hog with one additional officer right now and then check back in with council mid-year. Because we will know, we generally know every year, probably by the middle of June, where income tax is going to be for the remainder of the year. You pretty much, give or take about a half percentage point, where everything's projecting. It doesn't really change much. That'll give us a clear indication of where we are, and also to see what kind of overtime savings we're witnessing or not. Now, if it's a druthers of council, we can reprogram things with 2 additional officers and see if we can kind of still hit the same overall mark in the general fund, which we can. But was trying to be deferential to the operational concerns of the police division and if their hierarchy of prioritization right now. The question was really posited to the chief. What's more important to you, 2 officers or two additional correction officers and a dispatcher? I can get you 1 more patrol officer, no problem, with the same amount of money. So.
No, I totally understand those scenarios. Other things too, I look at it, and I, looking at planning to spend at a deficit, it's always kind of difficult because you always think back on, a year's a long time. We have some scenarios where we need to jump on opportunities, right? Unplanned costs come in 2 facets. You've got unplanned opportunities and unplanned emergencies. And so we experience plenty of those. But there's just some little things in here. I look at where, I don't know if we're just being super conservative on setting up the budget for this next year. Like, for example, I'll just pick on us. City council, we have contractual services. Last year we're 16.8, this year 25.5, next year 45,700. I don't know if we're just being overly conservative, saying, hey, we're going to add extra fluff in there, but
So, some of it is some planning and flexibility. So for that budget, some of it is for Amy's office, maybe the allowance of some transcription software or other things that may be of assistance. And also, one of the things we talked about was digital archiving. So right now, so many of our important records, even permanent records, even the ones that we are required to keep in hard copy form, and there are some, doesn't mean we can't digitally archive them as well, not only to make reproduction for public records requests or research happen much faster, more efficiently, but God forbid we do have a catastrophic event and half the building floods out or something, and, we lose those records,
somebody leaves the sink on.
Yeah. But anyway, so we have that. At least we can go back and, at least we have access to those records. So some of that is for digital archiving. Some of that is a little bit of an accommodation for any software needs. And also we've been running over for codification costs. So as you know, every year we go through American Legal Publishing or whoever it is, and we have to, do the new the acceptance of the codification, because obviously the folks in Columbus changed some things that are referenced in our codes, and we pass new laws and ordinances and stuff all the time, and, we have to refresh the code book. Well, certain years are cheaper than others, and the last couple of years we've been running hot. So that's where we account for that. We've been pretty lean in our not only for personnel, but our non-personnel estimations. I will be fully transparent with council. In this general fund, there are about 3 line items in here that are slightly padded. And those are for, I call them the Alamo line items, That's where you make your last stand at the end of the year. And those are, you'll see a little bit of money in other professional services in the city manager's budget, a little bit in other departmental, and maybe a couple other line items that's how if we run into those unexpected expenses, we love the opportunities, but the unexpected crises, that's where we draw from. And so this budget probably has a couple $100,000 worth of contingency in it, if you want to call it that. That's always baked in, that's always there, just to allow some flexibility on the negative side, the bad side. Anything that's a emergency opportunity, obviously, we still left meat on the bone in the general fund reserve for a quick supplemental to take care of whatever needs to be taken care of.
I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yes, sir.
And I know you probably won't pick on finance because they're sitting there, but of all the new positions proposed in here, what would you say would be like the lowest priority if you had to pick?
I think for right now, probably the process server and development services straddled with income tax, just because there's a contractual option for that. I think secondly would be that finance position.
I think you kind of see where I'm going with this.
I understand.
When I set up contracts and I do, the cost estimates, we do typically 5 years out. So we build in, there could be some on-ramping and additional out years, things like that. But I always want to make sure that when we bring people on, that they have a spot, and so I just want to cautious. I mean, I want to invest in the people, the projects, and the programs, but I want to make sure that we don't work ourselves in a pinch, 5 years down there. I mean, God forbid the economy goes, it's something that I've always cautious with, because I want to make sure the people that we have, we take care of. Another thing, so I looked at, you're projecting where we're going to be with the general fund balance at the end of this year.
Yes, sir.
Does that take into account our look at the homeowner phase 2? Okay. I was going to bring it up in unfinished business, but I saw that figure, and so I was wondering.
Yeah, no, that accounts for both rounds of the home improvement program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if there's a tertiary round, no.
Right. So that's kind of where my mind is if whether it's that program or
Yeah.
if we choose to embark on another endeavor next year, any sort of on the fly initiative, that's where I'm a little bit worried. Like, do we want to project we're going to be down to that 38.9%?
Yeah.
Or do we want to project maybe 41%? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where the science turns into art. Mm-hmm. I mean, undoubtedly. And it's really, at the end of the day, that's a comfort level assessment for you and your colleagues on this one. Because, yeah, we have to hedge against the unknown, Mm-hmm. We had a crystal ball, we'd all start our own hedge fund and make billions, but we don't. And so what you're discussing right now, Mr. West, is the quintessential debate you should have with your annual budget. because this is the most important thing that council does every year. You do a lot of important things, but this is absolutely the most important thing, because this is, at the end of the day, this is the document that tells the world, you know, from on high, this is what you deem valuable to invest in. These are your priorities. And also, this is your demonstration that you're acting as good fiscal stewards on behalf of our taxpayers and residents. And so that's more than a reasonable concern, you know. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm very risk adverse. I'd love to have 100% of annual reserve in the bank, but at the end of the day, though, you have to also look to see what is the city. Our job is to take in those tax dollars to then provide benefit and programs and infrastructure back out. It's an in and an out type of organization. We don't pay necessarily shareholder dividends or anything like that. But I think that's a really good discussion to have with all of council is this being our first year. And I'm going to tell you, there were staff in-house that were like, and at one point in time, I was also clutching my pearls, kind of a little concerned of like, God, we're proposing a $4.5 million deficit spend. Wow. We can ratchet things back and hold a little bit back. And maybe it's something that collectively council decides, you know what, let's not swing at everything right now. Some of these things, let's hold back till maybe mid-year and reconsider in 25, whether that's a position or two, whether that's some of the transfers. You know, for instance, the other $500,000 to parks, maybe you're like, you know what, I'm gonna appropriate $250 of it today, but let's talk in May or June to see where we're at price-wise and where everything is. That's more than prudent.
Yeah, I kind of look at where we have some projects that are not looking like they may become within budget currently. So I'm kind of like the bigger picture, and then I look at numbers, and so I want to make sure we have a little bit of wiggle room, not only for those, but then, you know, if we want to do, let's say, for example, round 3 or something like that, just in case, you know. So I don't know how the rest of council feels, but
Any comments on what Mr. West is talking about right now?
On the parks, I don't know if I want to do a wait and see. I'd rather push the $500,000 because we're in an election year and promises are made now, and then inflation hits the second quarter of next year, and then that $250 now costs us a lot more.
yeah, right now we're looking at, well, depending. I mean, some of the parks are a little bit different each project, but I'd say on average, your $350,000 per park would be about.
And the reason I mention that is because if you get bids now, in other words, he puts in our request for proposals out. It was always RFQs for me, so that's why I always have to adjust myself to the public world. If you do it now, and as long as there's no language in there, those contractors are locked to those numbers. Yeah. And I know it's bad, but I got hit with that one. I had a huge job. So even if they're building them in the first or second quarter of next year, you're locked into these numbers now. Versus if you say, okay, we're going to do $250 now, bid, and then you go second quarter, bid, that we might not get as much bang for our buck then than we do now. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we can move even quicker in reference to the parks because probably 80% of our cost is state approved. So we work directly with the prime on that.
Did you want to comment on his question? I'm comfortable with what you have proposed, what staff has proposed. So that works for me, but I also hear what you're saying, absolutely. But I am comfortable with where we are for what is being proposed. I do have one thing, and we brought it up before, it was public safety for the police. I know that's one of the things that we all really care about, we hear about, it's on our minds a lot. So just wondering if we're looking at the money that's available, could there be more money available to hire that other officer? Looking at the future as well, with the projects that we have, the expansion that we're going to be having at Renaissance Point, the aquatic center, talking about the high schools, and knowing that our operating level does need to be over 100 officers, and we're at about 80-ish, 80 right now. I say that number having spoken with chiefs.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I said that number, because that's what they told me. What, is that incorrect?
I don't have an opinion one way or another.
What I'm talking about is like where we would like to be as a city
Okay.
with the number of people, that residents that we have, and looking towards the future that I was talking about with the new projects. So I would like to see if that'd be a possibility to hire on the second one.
Yeah, I think hearing some of the discussion, I think let us go back to the drawing board on that and see what we can do and finagle. And also look at the timing of some of these positions as proposed. Some of these may very well not get, because you got to realize some of these positions, we're not going to be in a position to hire and fill them day one. Right. Although we've budgeted for all year expenses, some of these are not realistic to, whether they're civil service, positions, you have to have testing and everything else, or just the recruitment process takes time. So I think we're hearing some good feedback on this, and I think what we're gleaning, we'll also look to see if we can get maybe just a slight uptick in our carryover balance, I think, to kind of give you some options. I think, and as we put together any budget, I can't reiterate this enough. We are a little conservative on a few things to allow council the flexibility throughout the year to kind of make some course adjustments or some opportunity adjustments as they may come down the pike.
Thank you.
So
Mrs. Carter?
you were talking about public safety, of hiring two.
We were talking originally about the 5-year plan of 2 every year,
Okay.
new patrol officers.
Okay.
What they were talking about within the budget that we currently have, looking at making some changes. I was curious about making those changes, but also the possibility of adding the second officer instead of just the one. Like, is there a way to give more funding to allow for both?
And the correctional officers,
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to try to look at, I think.
right?
It strikes me, and I'll probably catch heck in the morning from folks, but I think as we kind of look at that, I think what we'll examine a little more closely is that additional dispatch position to see
I can see
what our best cost savings is.
all three, dispatcher, correctional officer, and officer on the street, very much needed right now.
Yeah,
And to remove officers off the street to put in and work inside the jail, I think that's really
yeah,
unhealthy.
yeah. That's what we're trying to avoid. Most definitely.
I don't have it in front of me. What do we have budgeted next year for vehicles specific to police? Did we have any purchases allocated?
We are. We're depreciating, so you'll see in uniform patrol, we're showing vehicle depreciation of about $290,000, which has been about where we are at. That number is established by our garage superintendent, Rex Hoyt, who looks at what the replacement schedule is on any given year and how much we have in the bank. We have a little bit of probably up until this year, we've had a little bit higher than you would expect, kind of ledger account amount for police vehicles, just because we went pretty much about 3 years without getting any, because they were just so hard to source. We've caught up to a certain extent. We still need to make some inroads, but I know that Chief Nelson and his command staff, along with the garage, they work hand in glove to get as many vehicles on that replacement schedule done each and every year. So that's a very realistic depreciation number. What I can also say is that I can't officially announce it, but if you had to hedge your bets, it looks like we may get some nice cooperation and funding for some charging stations. I think one of the things we're also looking at internally, both police but also in public works as well, is an eventual migration to at least a portion of our fleet being electric vehicles. Those have a different price tag. They're a little bit more expensive on the purchase end. The life of the vehicle's maintenance costs are less, or at least they're advertised as being less, because really all you have to worry about is brakes and tires instead of other preventative maintenance. So that plays into it, but we're getting close to being caught up. We're not there yet, but we've made good strides.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the general fund budget at this time?
I'm curious about the ARPA funds.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are they at this point?
So they are either all fully encumbered or spent, is my understanding. What you're probably referring to is City Council authorized a legislative item that, for lack of a better term, used whatever remaining revenue or ARPA revenue or ARPA funds that we had under the revenue replacement provision of the Federal Register's rules to pay public safety expenses for a portion of this year that would have been otherwise paid from the general fund. So if we were not to have done that and spent the ARPA dollars on something else, the projected fund balance that's up there on the screen would have been closer at the end of this year to 19 million instead of 20. We have supplanted the general fund's balance artificially by not paying planned general fund expenses out of the general fund. We paid them out of the ARPA fund, plain and simple, for related to public safety. And so what the general fund budget proposal in front of you tonight is, in a way, you can look at it, is using some of those ARPA dollars, because they were, it's from one pocket to the next in the same pair of trousers, right? But using that surplus revenue or surplus fund reserve in the general fund for specific upstaffing or programmatic purposes, like the new CAD system for dispatch or park transfer, or however else you want to look at it.
Any other questions or comments? Not at this time. All right, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. The next item on our agenda, well, before we do that, I'd like to take about a 7-minute break, 7-minute recess. See you back at 7:09. Thank you. Yeah, right there.
Right by Dollar General.
Like if you turn left onto Town Boulevard from Society Road, like going towards the highway.
I said inside Tech Mall,
Oh,
a substation.
We just don't know what's gonna happen with
A substation.
All right, ready to go?
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll come back to the meeting. So again, thank you, Mr. Cahall, for a wonderful budget presentation. The next item on the agenda this evening is our consent agenda. Mrs. Skank, please present the consent agenda.
For your consideration this evening, we have to receive and file the following board and commission minutes. From the Midpoint Library Board of Trustees, the minutes from June 19th, June 20th, July 2nd, and August 21st, 2024, and the Civil Service Commission minutes from August 15th, 2024. To confirm the appointment of Jessica Dingledine to the position of Income Tax Auditor in the Department of Finance, Division of Taxation, and the appointment of Sarah Ingram to the position of Water Treatment Assistant Lab Analyst in the Department of Public Works, Division of Water Treatment. To accept the resignation of Ms. Shayla Perkins from the Historic Commission, and to receive and file oaths of office for Kamari Fuller and Evan Rainey.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda. We will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes?
Mr. West,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mayor Slanka.
Yes, the yeses have it, and the motion passes. The consent agenda is approved. The next agenda item is legislation. We have 5 items of legislation this evening. Assistant Law Director, Mr. Brody Conover, the legislation, please.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. First tonight is ordinance number O-2024-73, an ordinance amending sections 1204.08 permitted principal uses, 1210.02 architectural standards applicability and waiver, and 1210.03 architectural standards for residential buildings of the Middletown Development Code included in the Middletown codified ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cahall, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think from last meeting, there might have been just a little bit of confusion on this proposed ordinance. So, because I know we were voting also on some text amendments related to cannabis-related businesses. So what's before you, in a nutshell, is an adjustment to the architectural standards that are part of our zoning code as they relate to residences and/or commercial uses. And also the table of permitted uses as they relate to residential in our BC, our business commercial flex districts that are predominantly located east of the interstate, kind of in the vicinity of the hospital, that area is currently still subject to a residential development moratorium as Planning Commission and then ultimately this body made some decisions one way or another as to how to handle things going forward. And so there may have been some confusion because in this packet, just because it was part of the Planning Commission set of minutes in the Planning Commission packet where they were also considering the cannabis-related text amendments, you probably saw a few proposed permitted use tables in here related to that, and I'm sure they may have thrown some of you off, rightfully so, because during the meeting I'm leafing through this and I was a little thrown off myself. But in a nutshell, this is a proposal from the Planning Commission, or recommendation from the Planning Commission as it relates to those architectural standard changes. So things like, the first floor of new single-family detached houses would have to have certain natural materials and the like, and then also changing the table of permitted uses for residential dwellings in those BC districts to be no longer permitted by right, and those would require some sort of rezoning to a planned unit development.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
It has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this legislation? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes?
Mr. West,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mayor Slanka.
Yes. The yeses have it, and the legislation passes. Mr. Conover, the next item, please.
Item 2 tonight is resolution number R 2024-28, a resolution repealing resolution number R 2023-36, imposing a one-year moratorium on residential development and the acceptance or issuance of any permit or any or other approval thereof within certain BC business center zoning subdistricts within the city of Middletown, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Cahal?
No, this is just the kissing cousin to the previous ordinance. This just now clarifies the extinguishment of that moratorium with the new use table in place in our zoning code.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mayor Slanka?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
The yeses have it, and the legislation passes. Mr. Conover, the next item, please.
Item 3 tonight is ordinance number O 2024-74, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing the purchase of various EMS equipment for the Division of Fire from Stryker, authorizing an annual maintenance agreement for the new equipment, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cahal, do you have anything to add?
No, just to refresh council's memory, this is just for a long-term purchasing plan and contract with Stryker for our EMS-related equipment in our fire division. The reason for the request for emergency passage tonight is simply because the vendor was only going to hold price for so long, and we have until probably this week to say yay or nay.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
Motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this legislative item? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mayor Slanka?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. West?
Yes.
The yeses have it, and the legislation passes. Mr. Conover, the next item, please.
Item 4 tonight is ordinance number O 2024-75, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing an extension of the current contract with Polecat Incorporated to remove Lime Lagoon sludge. This is a second reading.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cahal, do you have anything to add?
Nothing new since last meeting, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
Motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
So this is just to continue to attempt to reduce the lime pit. Where are we at on the pump that will make it where there's less of this stuff in the pit?
Yes, in talking to our Public Works Director, I believe that's going out to bid this week, the reconfigured bid package. And so our goal is to have something in front of you, hopefully, I believe, by the first meeting in November for bid award, assuming, knock on wood, everything goes to plan.
And let me be clear, I don't doubt that these folks are doing their job and doing their best, but when you look at it from roadside or aerial view, it still looks like it's growing.
Yeah.
So, that's all.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this legislative item? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mayor Slanka?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
The yeses have it, and the legislative item passes. Mr. Conover, the last legislative item, please.
Yeah, that's ordinance number O 2024-76, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing an extension of a contract with Middletown Management Incorporated for EMS billing services and declaring an emergency, but no action is requested until October 15th, 2024.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conover. Mr. Cahal, the staff report, please.
Yes, before council is a request by the fire division to extend our agreement with MediCount for our EMS billing and collections services. Just for his background, not only for council, but to the general public that may be listening or watching here in person or at home. For our EMS services, when we transport a patient, we bill their insurer, whether that be Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance, as allowed under our ordinances. MediCount works on our behalf to handle that invoicing process, that collection process, and that debt collection process as well with some of those insurers. There are probably in this region, there's probably 3 to 5 vendors that do these types of services for jurisdictions like us. As you'll see in the staff report, our arrangement with Middletown is that we pay them a management fee of equivalent to about 5.5% of what they collect on our behalf. So they're incentivized to collect as much as possible because that then goes to their bottom line as well. That 5.5% is a little bit lower than contracts that I'm used to seeing. And so I do concur with the recommendation of the fire chief to propose to you tonight a continuation of that arrangement. Our relationship with Middletown has been for many years. It's worked out really well, and we are actually seeing year-over-year increases in revenue collection. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cowhall. As this is a second reading emergency, there is no action required on this legislative item tonight. However, is there any discussion at this time? Hearing none, we will proceed. This concludes the legislation for the evening. The next item on the agenda is unfinished business. Do any council members have anything they would like to bring up under unfinished business?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter.
I'm wondering what's happening with Trail Bridge, because I came that way today and I seen 4 or 5 vehicles and the doors were open at the office. I guess that's the office.
Yeah, we did take some nuisance abatement action here. We are still making attempts to get a hold of who we believe are the owners. Actually, me and Mr. Conover, he doesn't know this yet, are having a conversation in the morning, discuss some other options to reach out and touch the ownership and make contact and to make sure and to ensure that we're on a long-term path towards compliance. So without getting into any other things that we probably shouldn't share in a public setting, I just want to assure you that we're running things to ground as quickly as we can.
That's good. I do know that the manager quit, so I don't know if that's public knowledge.
That's what
That
we're
is
allegedly
public
hearing,
knowledge.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Thank you. Is there any other unfinished business for this evening? Okay, hearing none, we will proceed to the next item on the agenda. The next item is new business. Do any council members have any new business this evening? Hearing none, we shall go ahead and move forward. The next item on the agenda is executive session. Do I hear a motion to move to executive session under the authority of ORC 121.22G1 to consider the appointment of a public official?
Motion. You have it.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded and to move to executive session. We will proceed to vote. Mrs. Skank, please call the roll.
Mrs. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. West,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mayor Slamka.
Yes. The yeses have it. We will be returning to open session to adjourn.